Hey guys, it's been over a month, okay? I haven't made a proper devlog in over a month, but that's only because I've been locked in trying to get the final public playtest ready. But more on that later in this video. So let's get straight into the devlog. Today, I'll be going over how I implemented character customization, which also happens to be my favorite feature in video games. So last time we left off at how I added sound into the game, and as well as how I got the game up on Steam, Epic and Play Store. This is your cue to go wishlist the game, by the way. No, I'm serious, go do it. I'll wait. Okay, you're done? Good. So not long after that, I decided to start working on some UI so I can finally replace the ugly placeholder menu. But there is one small problem. I suck at UI design. I mean, take a look at some of my other games. Wait, this one ain't that bad actually. But Project JazzGame is my dream game. It's my magnum opus. I can't settle for ain't that bad. I need something really good, so I decided to go to the asset store to see if I can get inspired by some of the UI templates there. And that was when I saw her. She was perfect. I downloaded the asset and put it in my project. It took a while, but I was finally able to replace all the template art with my own art. But that was when I noticed something that ruined everything. You see, the Heat UI, they use their own custom-made localization system, which might not be a big deal. But in the long run, I'm personally more comfortable with just using Unity's localization system. So it was because of that, and the asset also clogs up the update loop with a lot of unnecessary stuff. So because of that, I decided to make my own UI system based off the design of Heat UI. It didn't really take that much time. It was just basically a process of looking at the Heat UI and then breaking down what it was doing, and I remade it in my own script. And then if I got stuck anywhere, I could just take a peek at how Heat UI did something in their code and then do that in my code. With all said and done, I had a bunch of new UI components which were all heavily event driven, so no need for update loops unless they really needed it. And then I started adding in the localization really early because the longer you wait to add that in, the more painful it's gonna be. I made this editor tool to help me translate from English to the other languages which I'm targeting, which uses a local Python server which basically just uses Google Translate behind the scenes. I also made another local server which uses Google's Gemini AI because I was convinced that would give better results, but it's very slow because of the request rates. So I just stuck with using Google Translate. I'll probably get people to help me cross-check the localization, but that'll be when I get to that bridge. I also added in some sounds, which was really easy thanks to the audio system we implemented in the last devlog. You should watch that after watching this one, by the way. And then I hooked up the settings UI to actually do stuff, and the main menu UI was basically complete. I couldn't implement the in-game UI because I haven't fully planned that out yet. But you know what I definitely could make? The customization system UI. So for those of you who don't know, the game has had a customization system since Devlog 3, but it was only usable in the editor because there was no UI for it yet. But it was pretty bare bones, so I decided to show it some love with this new custom editor, and I went back and reworked the model so it supports a lot more customization options and a little something from our goners out there. So it was finally time to structure the UI for the customization system, and here's what I came up with. There's basically gonna be two main types of customization in the game. The body customization, just think of this as anything that alters the physical dimensions of the character. And then there's the cosmetic customizations. These are basically just clothes and accessories, basically things you put on top of the body of the character. And for the cosmetic customization, I'm gonna distribute all the game's cosmetics into different shops so you wouldn't be able to just access all of them in one place. And I'm doing this for two reasons. Reason one is to give the players an extra reason to explore the open world, and reason two is for an extra bit of memory performance. Let me explain. You see, each cosmetic is a scriptable object with a bunch of data on it, like meshes and textures, and these can take up a lot of RAM, ranging from anywhere between 1 megabyte and 10 megabytes. It might not sound like a lot for computers of this day and age, but I plan to have a lot of cosmetics in the game. So for example, if I decide to put in 20 different cosmetics, and that's not even a lot yet because there's around 6 or maybe 7 cosmetics currently in the game, and I haven't even gotten started yet. So imagine if each cosmetic averages around, like 15 megabytes. That's around 300 megabytes, and that's extremely wasteful. And I'm trying to get this game to run on a mobile device, so we can't have that. So let's get to work. Making the body customization UI was really easy thanks to all the UI components we made before. It was basically just a bunch of sliders, but I also had to make a new UI field for coloring, which will come in handy later for the cosmetics. I hooked up the UI to the customization system using scriptable objects and a bunch of events, and then I made an interaction system and hooked that up to the player, so now you can go in and out of the character customization sessions. And then I set up some cameras that transition in and out of themselves depending on what you're currently editing. And I also let you spin your character around so you can get a good view of what you're doing. And then it was basically ready, so I just moved on to the cosmetic UI customization. Creating a UI didn't take that much time either because I already had all the UI components. And then I realized I needed to make some icons for the cosmetics, so I quickly made this editor tool to help me do that. I made a custom scene with a dummy character which I'm gonna use for any cosmetic thumbnails from now on. And then I created all the icons I needed. And that was when I realized that my whole idea for splitting up the cosmetics into shops would not really work because of the way Unity handles references. You see, anything you reference in a scene gets loaded into memory, and that's recursive for the references as well. Using hard references like this can make your game really have high memory demands if you're not careful. Okay, let me give you guys a rundown. So let's take our hoodie cosmetic for instance. It has a bunch of string references which are fine, but it also has a prefab, and that prefab references a mesh, and that mesh is around 5 megabytes, and the hoodie also references 2 textures which are 10 megabytes each, so that's around 25 megabytes for just the hoodie cosmetic. The game would basically be unplayable on mobile if I keep this up, but luckily there is a fix. And the fix is basically just using soft references, which Unity handles with something they call the Addressables package. Think of it like this: instead of holding the cosmetic itself, we're gonna hold the address of where the cosmetic lives in memory. And with the setup I'm going for, all the cosmetics are gonna live on your local storage at first, and they only get loaded into memory when you need them. That's during a customization session, and the moment you finish from that session, everything gets unloaded from memory and hopefully making the game easier to run. But all that is easier said than done. This drove me insane for almost 4 days straight, and it turns out the issues was something completely unrelated to the cosmetic system. Like, let me share some of the problems with you and how to solve them in case anyone else needs this sometime in the future. So in my customization system, there is a function for baking meshes which uses their normals and vertex colors and a bunch of the other data. But when building using addressables, the meshes go through a stripping process which removes all of that data. So that broke my function and it couldn't work for a really long time. And there's no real way of flagging usage per asset. The only way to disable this mesh stripping is to disable it project-wide. But this is not really recommended because it's gonna bloat the file size of your game and probably the memory usage as well. So here's what I did. I created this shader which basically uses all the mesh's data channels, the ones I needed preserved anyways. And then I made a material from that and I kept that material on every mesh that I need its data channels preserved. And then I rebuilt the asset bundle. That way Unity doesn't strip the data channels and you can use it for whatever. Another issue I was getting is ghost references, which is a bit niche, but for the fix, you just basically do not load a scene with async and fire and forget. You have to await if you want to load a scene asynchronously. And apart from that, you just make sure you call release whenever you're done using the addressable asset, and you should be fine. There's also a lot more problems, but those were just due to my skill issue. But long story short, it works, and here's how. I made a cosmetic database script, which any script that wants to get a cosmetic has to go through. The first script that calls for a cosmetic will trigger it to load in from your local storage, and then we cache that in RAM. So any other script that calls that is gonna get the cached copy. Same goes for textures as well, with the only difference being we copy the texture on the GPU and we release it from memory immediately. I did it this way to make sure that the only thing alive in memory is the texture I need and not the whole asset bundle, due to the way the addressable loading works. I upgraded my serializable dictionary inspector and now it's really good. I use it for everything, including monitoring the references and the loaded assets on the cosmetic database. I use it on a lot of more stuff too, like the customization manager, the game save data, the combo attacking system, and a lot more. I highly recommend taking time to just develop tools that will make working on your game a lot more easier. So now we can load cosmetics in and out of memory, and I noticed a problem with the mesh baking because it causes huge stutters on my PC, and if it can stutter my PC then it might probably crash a mobile device, so I needed to fix it. But there was no real way I could optimize the mesh baking process anymore because it's a really expensive operation that needs to be run on the main thread due to all the mesh data access. And I was already using jobs and bursts for all the blend shapes and triangle stripping. So in order to stop the stutters, I just made the mesh baking async, which came with its own problems like these visual artifacts when on baking and even when putting on clothes. I'll have to think of a way to hide this, but that's a problem for future me. I added in the ability to color the cosmetics using that color field I mentioned earlier. And I used my trusty save system, which I've been using since I made Blob Dash, to save and load all the character customizations, while saving other stuff like settings and the control bindings with player prefs. But my save system uses JSON and it was encrypted though, but it was still kind of big and I haven't really put anything in it yet, so I had to upgrade it to now use binary. But I also have the option to switch back to JSON if I'm debugging or I want to check out what's in the actual save file. I had to make a bunch of new icons for the customization system and also get it to match the style of the UI. And I put in the game's currency for buying items, so now I gotta figure out how you guys can actually earn money in the game. But that's a story for a future devlog, so subscribe if you don't want to miss that. So at the end, I got a really nice customization system that works at runtime and in the editor. Although the editor version is less restricted and it's even what I plan to use to make the NPCs in the game. And now, before I end this devlog, I'm gonna take some time to address the current state of the game, the release date of the next playtest, and what to expect next from Project JazzGame. So let's get straight into it. A lot of you guys have been asking when the release date is, and the answer to that is I really don't know when the game will fully be released. But as for the next playtest, that is sometime this year. Maybe this month's ending if I'm quick enough, but it's definitely dropping this year. And after that, there is no more public playtests. The rest of the playtests will be done in private with Steam keys or Google email lists. And after that, the next place you're gonna get your hands on JazzGame again is gonna be the public demo that would release on Play Store, Steam, and Epic. But that will be definitely next year, probably early next year or middle next year. And then after that, the next place you're gonna play JazzGame again is at early access launch, which is probably ending of next year or early upper year if that's like the worst case scenario. And as for the full release on all platforms, that just depends on how well the early access does. But don't quote me on any of this, I'm still new to this game dev shit, like I don't even know what I'm doing, so yeah. I gotta go work on some stuff now, so I'll see you guys when I see you guys.